Hello and welcome to KALOS. This is Chris Holes, and in this series we're going to discuss with various musicians, composers, conductors around the world and gain some insights into performance in the industry for musicians. So stay tuned. I'm here in the first of a series of interviews with famous musicians around the world. And today we're going to discuss the topic of vibrato in music, and especially in string performance and vocal performance. And here with me today is the very versatile and very well-known conductor, Ola Rudner. So welcome, Ola. And
thank you so much.
We met recently in Hong Kong for lunch, and we were talking about the phrase, your phrase, which I hope you don't mind, I'm going to pinch for this, too much heat as far as vibrato goes, which I think is very appropriate. I love it. So first of all, thanks for joining us. And what I would like to ask you, as a conductor and a violinist, what do you consider too much heat? What did you mean by that, first of all?
Well, too much heat is when you have a vibrato, very intensive vibrato, going the whole time. I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. They say Tartini was unbearable because he had such a quick vibrato that was going all the time. And yeah, it's not a new phenomenon, but that's simply disturbing. There is no correlation to the emotional part of the music. And vibrato for a violinist has, on a modern instrument, I should say, has basically two sides to it. There is one which is simply making the sound more rich. Because of the high tension especially on the E string, it tends to be very steely, and the overtone register is very narrow. And if you have some vibrato going, you have more overtone, and so it becomes a richer sound. And so that's the sort of simply more beauty in the sound. But then you have the emotional part, and the emotional part must go with what you are playing, what sort of music it is, and what plays in the music in it. These are my basic ideas on vibrato as an instrumentalist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Do you think the, let's say, the advent of early music performance or historically informed practice has had a big influence on let's say, playing of today in modern orchestras as far as vibrato goes?
Well, I think the whole discussion going for now, I don't know, 50, 60 years almost, has a big impact on the thinking about what is vibrato, why do we use it, and how do we use it. In the bigger orchestras, it tends not to be so important. One does simply vibrate unless someone tells you not to. There are orchestras that refuse to not
Yes.
vibrato. So which I would say like this: we have many orchestras in this world, and I don't mind if some of the orchestras sound different from the other. I mean, this should be the case.
Yeah. Okay, that leads to my next question. Yeah, how much can you interfere with an orchestra as far as vibrato goes? If you want them to play tens of vibrato without any vibrato, are they responsive generally?
Well, I mean, since I'm not, in any case, on that side that I say everything should be without vibrato, because I believe that's completely wrong. Then it never comes to that point. But which is nice for me, when it comes to a place where you have a situation, an atmosphere that demands you to have no vibrato, then it's usually absolutely no problem to say, let's feel this icy or less warm feeling here, and do it without vibrato. Let's try that, and we try it, and in the context, it becomes so much stronger than if you use this, let's say, special effect from my side all the time, because then it just becomes annoying and cold. You know, so too hot or too cold. These are the two different sides of the problem.
Yes. Well said. And of course, I think going back to early music performance, it's a question of the instruments themselves too, and the strings. So
Yeah. But already in the 16th century, we are talking about the human voice, vox humana, and it was said by everyone that we should try to play an instrument sounding like the vox humana, like our voice. And since we have also proofs of what they meant, in the sense there are organs with one little thing that you can push that says vox humana, and then comes a vibrato. So you would ask yourself, what do they mean? If they don't mean vibrato with vox humana, they do, because when they talked about the human voice in those days, they always say that there should be, I don't know, I can't remember now, I looked it up, all these different ideas and names for vibrato that one had for a human voice, and there are so many also for the instrument. So I should have. It goes from a sort of trill to this kind of idea, but it's talked about as being the agreeable sound when you have the vibrato, an agreeable sound. And when you are, it's interesting, in some places in the 16th century, when they looked for singers for the chorus, they said they should have this agreeable sound, and not, there should be this slow, sort of wavy sound, which makes the sound rounder, like I said, for the instrument. So it was always there, only how much is always the case. And as you say, and as you say, when you go back to the instruments at the time, they had lower tension, they had different types of strings, and certainly they had more overtones anyway. So the necessity to warm this up was perhaps not as big, but still people wanted to show the emotion even then. We shouldn't believe that emotion is something modern. And this is one of the faults, that we have gotten suddenly the idea that a chorus from that time even should be sung without any vibrato at all, because it sounds so pure. But it may not be correct. It may not be correct, because they said, as I said, a chorus singer should have this, even boy sopranos should have this, which we have gone away from. We have decided boy sopranos should not have vibrato when they sing in the chorus. It's very interesting. I mean, you can dig around and find things that makes you get big surprises.
No, it's such a hot topic, of course, and always controversial between the purists of the original instrument movement.
Yeah, but if I may say, in the meantime, that I talked to a professor in Bern in Switzerland for old music, and he told me that in the 80s or 70s or 80s, the research stopped for a while because it wasn't the thing to do. It was a little bit like we have found a new wonderful way to sell more CDs, or at that time not CDs. We have this new way, and so it should be performed this way, and it was sort of an easy way out. You didn't have to think, you just said no vibrato, and now we have a new movement, and this, of course it's interesting. It puts a different spotlight on the music, completely different. And in a way it was very healthy, because it demanded from all the players more and more to think about phrasing. Because completely without any emotion, of course, is not possible. Music can't be. So there was a sort of development coming from this movement. And even the most notorious anti-vibrato conductor like Norrington made music via the phrases, but he had sold himself. I mean, he said this officially, so I'm not saying anything wrong, that this is the Stuttgart sound. This is without vibrato. We do everything without vibrato. If someone asks me, this is how we do it. And it's not to do if it's correct or not correct. This is our sound. And but he worked on the phrasing, on the articulation in the orchestra. And so sometimes the results are amazing. Sometimes I can't really listen to it, but sometimes it's really interesting to see that there's so much more of expression if you're not thinking about the vibrato.
I think conductors like Nikolaus Harnoncourt also prove that how important expression is, whether the techniques be modern or old school Dutch.
Yes, absolutely. Interestingly, a young colleague of mine went to Concertgebouw to conduct, and he demanded, after first playing through, that they play without vibrato, the whole thing.
Really?
And so they tried again, and the orchestra didn't respond. They played normal. And so he asked again, and he said, look, I'm not so old, and let's try this. I know I'm not so famous. Let's try it. They didn't want it at all, and he was even said goodbye. Because it was too much. It was too simplified for them. Mm-hmm. And I think this is, I mean, it's not a very nice situation. I wouldn't like to be in that situation, to be thrown out, basically. But there is a point to it. To generalize, it's not in anymore. And people have realized that it was exaggerated to do it completely. I mean, depending on the music, it may or may not work, but you can't say that, even Norrington said so without actually having looked into it, that the orchestras played without vibrato at Mahler's time, which is not true. If you listen carefully, you hear they all had vibrato. And one famous concertmaster was Rosé, and he had vibrato like, like Tartini, much too quick. So it's difficult to hear. And even the one who was the classical violinist in the 19th century, Joseph Joachim, who was the purest of all violinists, because other violinists in the 19th century, they used vibrato more than he did, because he wanted it purest. And so he was backing down. But even he, if you listen to the very few recordings that there are, he has a quite intensive vibrato. Yes. So the vibrato may have been quicker than we are used to. And this is interesting, that our concept of vibrato is, I mean, even Mozart said that for him, the ideal vibrato for a singer was 6 Hz, 6. And that's quite quick. That's a quite quick vibrato. And he said, I can't stand when they have up to 10, 12 Hz. I can't stand it. He said, this is his words. These are his words. So vibrato was normal for him.
Absolutely.
For a singer. Yeah.
Oh, wow, interesting. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, so as as a violinist,
Yeah.
when you trained as a violinist at university,
Yeah.
did you work on all aspects of vibrato, or how did you come to develop
Well,
your own vibrato, Ola's vibrato?
now, I mean, growing up, there was no discussion about vibrato at all. But this is long time ago. And when I came to study in Copenhagen, it was also not really a topic that was given much thought. This was in the 70s, and it was just starting to influence. And there were, I remember, we had some people coming to teach in how to play the violin, but they did not forbid vibrato. But my big, what should I say, the most compulsive influence was really from the big musician Chandra Vig, who, when we played as an orchestra with him in the Camerata, now called Camerata, we were always talking about that. He said, which is very true, when it says expressive, with expression, what does it mean? Is it cold or is it warm? We assume straight away that it means hot. and he said, look, it's not always this. We don't always need this he called it competition vibrato, going like a machine. He said, I detest it because it has to be with the music, the expression. And he was the one who said there are these 2 points. You can have the vibrato to make the sound lusher, and you have it as an expression. And this was very logical to me. Of course, then after this, there was many movements coming and going, and in my mind, I tried to understand this, and I started reading about it, and then, of course, you come across Leopold Mozart, for one, in his time, when he describes how to do the vibrato. It's very specific how to move your hand up and down the fingerboard, and not to use it too much, but not to use it too little. On long tones, you have to use it, and then, of course, if you go to other people, there were big cellists at a little bit later, but basically not so late as we would like to think, who said you should vibrate every note, quick or slow. And this is not talking about 20 years ago, but really in the 19th century, like I think it was Piatti, one of Piatti or one of those Italian famous cellists at the time. Of course, not everyone agreed on this, and Joseph Joachim was one who didn't agree with it. They thought it was too much, too heated.
Too heated.
Yeah.
I think when we spoke in Hong Kong, we were talking about our mutual admiration for Janine Jansen.
Yeah. No, I find I don't think about vibrato when I listen to her, and this is what is for me the most important thing. If I hear the vibrato all the time, then I cannot stand it. But if it's such an integral part of the expression of the music, then you don't think about it. It's normal. It's right. I mean, I have, which I often tell people, a recording of David Oistra, who wasn't very for or against anything like this. He just played, so to speak, with his music. And there is a recording of the Scottish Fantasy by Bruch that we don't listen to so much, but it's on a LP. And I remember the first time I listened to it, I could not believe it, because it starts with a long note, and it's hardly any vibrato there, or no vibrato at all in the beginning. You don't know where the note comes from. So he felt the essence of the music, completely perfect. But I mean, when you hear it, it seems completely perfect. And so he then changed it, of course. But this way, you understand what is vibrato.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have it in a piece like that? We have it coming and going, and the notes are more or less hot. They may not be hot at all. And he creates this very, I should say, melancholic feeling, which has no need for vibrato. You have the whole music sitting down on you, and it's amazing. And then you realize this is one way of using vibrato, and Janine has certainly her idea in this way as well. I don't know how aware she is of how she uses the vibrato, but if it's intuitive or instinctive, fantastic. Yeah.
I agree. Yes. Yeah, it's as you said. It seems so natural, so integrated into her movements as well.
Yeah. No, it's a pleasure to see and hear violin playing like this.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your chat. It was very, very interesting. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas.